And Mike, go right ahead. Go for it. All right.
Great, thank you. Yeah, as I was saying as we were going to break, we've looked at about 10 years, almost 10 years worth of data now of scanning very large, complex, geographically dispersed networks, both in the federal sector as well as the commercial, large financial services, pharmaceuticals, petrochemical. And what we've done is started to look at trend data over time, really around kind of how folks are securing their network. I know lots of data has been already published around securing endpoints and watching data, whether that data be at rest or at motion. We're really focused on, and this report is focused on, the infrastructure. How are you protecting your network, and are all the proper safeguards in place? So just a couple things I'll highlight as we go through. The first is we're finding that your intrusion detection systems, your intrusion prevention systems are not optimally placed for securing your network. As we all know, networks grow, networks change over time, and what happens is that you've deployed an IDS system at a point in time, and it maybe doesn't reflect the current infrastructure that you have. So maybe it's not up to date in terms of understanding the address space that's in use. Maybe you're not covering new subnets. Maybe you've done some segmentation within your network to do a better job at defense in depth, but really haven't updated your IPS IDS to take that into account. So we're seeing organizations that just really aren't covering the edges of their networks the way they should. Then the next kind of piece is kind of a step in the same direction, is that we see growth of networks, but we're not necessarily doing the proper job in terms of vulnerability scanning. We're not covering all ends of our network. I think we do a very good job at focusing on the core of the network, but we found in a large number of organizations, over 75% of the organizations that we deal with are not running vulnerability assessment against some of the most critical portions of their network. They do a good job at defending the core, but typically things like branch offices or remote locations that now have just as much computing power as your data centers, just as much critical information, aren't being as covered as well with the vulnerability management kind of scanning. The other one, and this is one that harkens back to, what I would have hoped was days gone by, but we still see devices out there that have default network credentials, right? Out of the box, default passwords, not just read strings on routers, but wireless access points that have default configurations still on them. Devices that are being allowed to be managed by any address on your network. So you think about just kind of simple, good, basic blocking and tackling network policies just aren't being enforced, and I think it's important as we continue to grow as a security industry, as a set of watchdogs for helping to protect the network, that we take care of some of these basic blocking and tackling kind of items. The other one, which ties back into a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, is the growth of non-traditional IPs on the network. We talked about control systems and how they have non-traditional IPs, but you think of things now like physical security that are being connected to your network. Maybe your HVAC, right? Your heating, ventilation, air conditioning in your building is connected to your network. We see medical devices, right? We see all kinds of things now being connected to the your traditional IP network, and in some cases they're just not the type of devices that you want everybody on your network to have access to. So one of the things that I'm very concerned about is that we're not segmenting our networks internally properly to protect those kinds of things, right? Physical security, right? Your card swipe when you walk into the building, right? There's no way that should be connected to a network that has the regular, users on the network having access to that, Allen Bradley programmable logic controller that's controlling access. It doesn't make any sense, and we need to start to take into account the architecture changes of our network as we move forward. And then finally, one that I really wished we had solved by this point, but we still see it, and we see it in over 10% of the networks that we scan. And as I said, we're dealing with some of the largest, most complex networks in the world, but we can't get rid of the unsecured wireless access points. We're seeing them pop up all over the place, not just in commercial space. We see it in the federal markets as well, where somebody for a well-intentioned purpose, right? Maybe you have, not to pick on the Army, I'm an ex-Army guy, but maybe you have a supply sergeant in the Army who wants to do his job better, right? Who's got all the best intentions in the world, goes to CompUSA, buys a wireless access point, installs it in a facility so that he can do inventory better. So that he can now walk around with his laptop and do inventory instead of taking a clipboard and then having to transfer it back to a desktop kind of system. It's those kinds of devices that are being added to the network that are they cause problems. And we've seen throughout time the problems of these devices on the network. And we know some of the worst data losses have happened through these kind of unknown connections, these backdoors into networks that we're just not monitoring. So we're going to continue to kind of collect data, publish data on a regular basis. We'll focus on, again, as I said, the network level vulnerabilities, right? Those things that really affect the infrastructure, and probably those things that affect the access to your data, to your systems. Because I think it's an often overlooked portion of kind of that security triangle, right? I tend to think about securing the endpoints, securing the data, and then securing the network. And I think if you're focused on all three of those, then you really start to have a true kind of defense in depth strategy. And whether that network be a control system network, whether it be a pure administrative network, whether it be a classified network in the government, the same basic principles kind of apply. And we'll continue to publish data, and hopefully that data helps network managers, security managers understand the vulnerabilities that are out there associated with their network, and they can take remediative action.
Mike, I think that was certainly a great overview of everything that's going on today out in the network. And I think one of the things which is something, some of this, I think you're right on point with, the wireless networks, we should be able to, clip that, and really everybody should be aware of that by today. But I think one thing which you really hit on, and it was point 4 in your report, all right, about the non-traditional IP-enabled devices. I think as we go to more and more automation, and we begin to digitize quite a bit of accesses and resources to make our organizations more streamlined, you're right on the money there. Boy, that point hit me right between the eyes. All right, one of the things we were kind of fooling around with down at G First, and I guess you'll understand this as well, is the Blackberries and the Androids. You're right, the new phones, the smartphones that are out. So here I am. I could be Joe in one part of your building and Rebecca in the other, and I'm saying, Rebecca's going to be on the air in a few minutes. I got to get his, so she gets this to Mike. Let me throw it over my Android, and here's all the company data going over Android that is completely unprotected.
Yep.
All right.
Hey, it's amazing. Not just so those kinds of devices obviously represent a tremendous threat, and there's lots of folks that are looking at kind of the how you handle data out there. I'll give you another example, and it's kind of a humorous one. I was in a conversation with somebody last week who had gone into a fast food store to buy themselves a hamburger, and was told that they couldn't buy a hamburger because the computer system was down. So it really comes to not transfer of data, but also comes to running our business, right? Imagine shutting down a set of McDonald's or a set of Burger Kings or a set of Pizza Huts during the lunch hour, and what that means to the individual business owner, because all of a sudden the systems that are point of sale systems and order entry systems that now are on a network and being infected. It's mind-boggling to think about all the permutations of devices that we're putting on our networks today, and we're trusting to protect our data, but yet we're not taking the proper steps as we bring them on. We're not securing them. We're putting them on for convenience sake. We're putting them on for accessibility's sake, but we're not necessarily taking the proper steps to safeguard the network of the data.
No, I think you're right on the money there. The other thing is, in police departments all around the city of New York, they used to manually pump gas, for all the radio cars.
Right.
You used to go up, pull out the hose, throw it in the car, and you'd be done. Well, today everybody uses smart cards. Everybody uses smart cards. So what if it didn't work? All right. And what if when you went to Hess or any of your other stations out there, and all of a sudden it wasn't accepting your credit card? These are all things that people don't even consider. They just take them for granted these days. And so I think when you talk about non-traditional IP-enabled devices, it can really have an exponential effect on a lot of different resources that we just quite frankly, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, whether it's going to Pizza Hut, Burger King, or McDonald's, or getting gas in your car, it's those very simple, lifelike examples that people don't realize how it'll be impacted. So it does make a difference. Mike,
Yeah,
was
just
there?
yeah, again, I was going to say, imagine going down the Jersey Turnpike and not being able to buy gas or not being able to use your speed pass. If you got no cash in your pocket, and none of us carry cash anymore, you might have to wait for somebody to come pick you up.
Yeah, how would we go to Ocean City, Maryland, or Wildwood, or any of the Tom's River shore points? Huh? That would be impossible, huh? All right. Just before we run out of time in this segment, was there anything else in this report? Anything else that you wanted to highlight while we were at it?
I think the report's up on our website. So if anybody's interested, it's up at the Lumeta website, and it's got the facts and figures. And I won't kind of bore your audience with giving you 76% here, 50% there, but it really does kind of highlight the trends over the last decade in large, diverse, complex networks. And I think we're taking we're bringing together some interesting information, and as I said, we'll continue to publish that information with the goal of improving our industry, right? Improving how we do business as a security group.
Okay, Mike, I certainly appreciate that. And this will be up for on demand, and hopefully we'll be hearing from you on our blog as well as you kind of update us as we go through some of this. So all